Laura with the remainder of the budget. Please, Laura, go ahead when you're ready.
Just a couple small areas that we'll make comment on. Starting on, still under tab E, page 52, is the health and social services. If you recall, this is where the city has historically helped some outside agencies with different funding. I'll comment that it is the same amount as last year.
51.
Yeah,
52 is nothing.
Sorry, 42. Did I say 41?
He said 52.
Alright, it's page 42. My goodness.
okay. Thank you, Laura. That's fine.
It has been a long day. So these are the list of the different agencies that the city has historically funded, and everybody has requested the same amount as the prior fiscal year.
Hello, the taxi service in town has not changed at all, has it? I had somebody hit me up here not too long ago and thought that couple taxis were no longer in operation anymore.
That I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to ask the front office gals,
There's
because
Carroll
they know
Cab.
more about that than I do.
There was an all-American cab that used to do, but they just do stuff for county stuff, long distances. They don't do anything in town. And there was Carroll Cab.
Yeah, I honestly don't know.
I do believe one of them has ceased operations. I think
Yeah.
it's because of health issues.
What is so that? So that doesn't affect this amount at all, by that, or?
No, okay, so here, the taxi ticket sales is what we sell here, and then the expense is we remit it to Region 12, so we're just passing through the money. And then the program itself actually does ask for,
$16,025.
okay, yes, an actual cash outlay amount, and so we just write them at Region 12 a check for that.
So would that, if it became more popular, would that raise our expense here?
Yes.
I'm following. Okay.
Yes, because
It's the same because it seems to be stable.
right, and it's an estimate, we just don't know for
I
sure how
understand,
much.
But it's been like this for,
This covers ourselves, yes.
Yeah.
If I remember right, the reason we do this is we don't have public transportation down, so this subsidizes it through Region 12.
And just to recall too, you'll see in revenue, you have a tax ticket. So, unless Region 12 asks for additional contribution, direct contribution that's $16,025. Once that goes up, it's a dollar in, dollar out.
Any other questions about the outside agencies of the city funds?
No.
Okay, if not, the next part of the budget that I was gonna discuss is the general, what we call the general government. It starts on page 58. And the detailed information starts under tab K, specifically the legislative and executive, which is council pay and mayor pay. The big thing that's going through this area is we do have some monies allocated for some agenda management software. We have looked at and done 3 demos with 3 different companies. Now we're working on what's our next step and trying to decide who, if we would want to make a recommendation. So that's the monies that is in fiscal 20, and then maintenance would be in the fiscal 21.
And one item on that is, we're certainly gonna be looking for some volunteers from council to talk about next steps. So if I don't get volunteers, a couple of you will probably get tapped to come and sit in on some discussions with staff on that. Because obviously agenda management is your meetings, the agendas for the meetings, so it's important for the council.
Well, maybe it would even, sometime just a one-on-one meeting with everybody or group. Get everybody's contextual input so that we all have some input in it.
Absolutely, and certainly before we make a purchase, we'll have those discussions, but to kind of find out what you guys really want out of it. I've heard from a couple of you, but those couple of you I may reach out to have more discussions.
The next area is what we call the financial administration. This is the basic daily operations of city offices. The main difference from last year to this year is we will need to enter into a new audit contract. Our current contract with our current service provider ended with the completion of our fiscal 19 audit. And so we will be going out to bid to seek proposals for a new one. I'm not sure how much that will change from year to year, as well as if we will have the same auditor or not. And I also have a little bit of monies allocated, in there to begin looking at some electronic imaging software for electronic storage of documents. The next area is elections. So in fiscal 20, we had our city elections, and that's the $6,250 that's allocated. And then in fiscal 21, as council has discussed about holding a bond referendum for the rec center project. So that would be that other amount for fiscal 21.
Is that a pretty hard cost, that's that exact amount?
No, I'm just basing it off of what we paid for the city. Yeah, and it was just under that dollar amount. So I'm not sure what the next one's gonna be for sure.
Gotcha.
So hopefully we're in that area.
Okay.
That ballpark.
I didn't know if that was like a hard cost,
No.
that you already knew, but.
No.
Right.
I don't.
Do we get bill from the county on that? I'm assuming for the ballots and stuff that they've got created.
Did we what? Get billed?
Get bill from the county on
Yes.
that? Okay.
Yes. Then the next is our legal services area. This not only includes our city attorney retainer fee, but also if we seek outside advice, namely some general questions. If we have personnel issues and questions, we work with Allers, I guess Allers for everything else just about,
Mhm.
and then bond questions and TIF questions. Then we have the city hall general building area. The only thing that is major that could impact this is we currently are out to seek bids right now for cleaning services. So those are due back on Tuesday, and then we'll have a better idea of, I guess, where we're gonna go after this. This area of the budget also supports 0.67 of our building maintenance specialist. The next section is what we call the tort liability, or basically all of our insurance, property liability, worker comp, all comes in this area. I did include a 5% increase in our premiums. That's a yes. So hopefully we're okay.
We've been pretty consistent with where it is.
Yeah, in years past, actually, a couple, 2, 3, 4 years ago, we were typically under that. This year, we were right at that 5%.
Okay.
And if I recall correctly, when we renewed our property insurance this year, ICAP changed the way they did the ratings, and they're slowly implementing this new process that we're probably gonna see some type of an increase every year. And then the last section here is the miscellaneous general fund. The main difference from fiscal 20 to fiscal 21, this is kind of the catch-all area. If we really don't have a good spot for something to go in a different area, we usually typically will put it in here. For instance, in fiscal 20, we have some monies allocated for when we did the study for the rec center building project, as well as doing some of this initial purchasing and some initial cleanup stuff with city apartments at 224 North Main Street. That's also in fiscal 20. So fiscal 21, we really don't have anything major identified going forward. Are there any questions over that section or anything that we just talked? The next page is what we call our general fund transfers. This is where money gets transferred in and gets transferred out. Most of the bulk of the transfer in is the employee benefits. So state code says this is a special revenue, so we have to, when we receive that money through property tax collections, we have to deposit it into a separate fund. And then from that separate fund, we can transfer it out to where it's funding those expenses. So for instance, the bulk of it's going into the general fund, as Randy said earlier, some of it is going into road use tax as well. Then the other transfer, the transfer out is, the bulk of, in fiscal 20, we'll talk about fiscal 20 real quick, is to help fund the airport projects that are going on, as well as 5,000 in fiscal 20, and then another 5,000 in fiscal 21 is for the housing grant that we're working with Region 12 on. We're going to actually account for that in a separate fund of its own and then just transfer the monies out of the general fund for the city's contribution that they had already agreed to do. So that's the transfers. Then we have our, what we call our general revenues, which is basically, most of this area is the property tax, the 810 levy we collect, and the insurance levy gets deposited into here, as well as the cable franchise fee gets deposited into this section of the budget. And one other thing, the intergovernmental that you see on there, that is the backfill that the state is currently funding. So the portion that you see here is the portion that relates to the backfill, that as it relates to collections for the 810 and the insurance. There is backfill money that also gets deposited into the employee benefit fund as well as the debt service fund. We currently, or we're anticipating, based upon this year's collections and hopefully next year stays very similar and that the state continues to fund it, it's right around the $200,000 mark. So if the state decides that they don't want to backfill that, there's a hole of $200,000 throughout our whole city budget and of roughly 145 in the general fund that we would have to cover somehow. And we do not have anything identified at this point. We're assuming we're getting the monies from the state.
Why does it backfill into different categories and not just into the general fund?
Because it all goes back to how your levy is put together, and we have those different components of the levy. So it does specifically relate to those.
You just do a percentage off the levy.
It's all determined by the state.
Oh,
'Cause they
the
have-
state tells you where to
The
put it.
state tells us,
Oh, okay.
this is the amount of
This
money
one
that we're
goes there, and it
backfilling.
goes
Yep, yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and the state has a pot of money that they set aside, a couple of years ago, they froze that pot amount and said, this is all that you're gonna get forever until we don't fund it anymore. So then, and then it's divvied out to all the communities.
So a little bit when you see the number decline, the state's still funding the same dollar amount. Our growth is not keeping up with the state average, and if you kind of think about the metros, they're growing,
Mhm.
so some of that backfill is flowing
Towards
really towards the metros. So that's why you see that difference there.
Okay, I believe that's just about almost everybody's, or it should be all the general fund areas. Does anybody have any questions as it relates to the general fund stuff before we would go on to any other funds? The next area would be the hotel motel tax fund. And it might be just as helpful, maybe more helpful, to pull out these sheets. Should have been on the inside cover of your book.
Sitting on top of my Russian papers.
So this sheet shows the prior 2 years of where we had spent the money and the amount of hotel motel tax, the reestimate for our fiscal 20, and then the proposed budget 21, and then projections out for 4 more years. We anticipate, or we hope we get around 220,000 in hotel motel tax revenue. As you can see in fiscal 19, it did dip a little bit, but in fiscal 18, it was above that 220. So I did look back a few years prior to this, even on this sheet today, and we were at like 248 in fiscal 17, we were at like 259 in fiscal 16. So we've been trending over that 220. I'm not sure why it was under the 220 this past year. For
Didn't
sure.
get the, didn't have the, move it up. Oh, that's it.
I'm sure that did have some, now, is that the whole,
Yeah, I don't know
whole
about
amount? Probably
I
not.
would guess it's not the whole amount,
But-
but yeah.
I'm sure that did have played, right?
Is there a sunset on this tax?
No, and you can see, the only state requirement is that at least 50% of the revenues shall be expended for, there's this whole long paragraph, but it's for like tourism, recreation types of things. I feel like the things that we have been doing have always kind of gone around that. So the big thing in fiscal 21 that we're proposing is having $250,000 for the theater at the rec center, doing improvements there. I guess, I don't know, Jack, if you have any comments to make about if you've done some progress or work on that so far?
We have not. We're gonna have a committee together in the next 60 to 90 days to kind of, and there'll be theater people, interested parties, just to see what they would like to see. Then we'll move forward with if we need an engineer or not to do so. I'm guessing lights will be a big part of it, speaker system.
What about
Yeah, that she'll be on our committee. We had a committee several years ago that got together in the old city hall, so we'll try to get most of the users
It's
back.
like some of the people that use it, like the dance studios, all strings attached, yeah.
Kemper. we have one of our
Kemper,
users,
yeah.
yeah.
Carroll doesn't probably use it as much anymore, do they?
No, they have their own.
They have their own.
Yeah.
Another item
On
in
my
here.
travels, I've never seen a motel without this tax.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Everybody has it.
Right. Another bigger item is the rec center HVAC upgrades. There are some monies allocated in the general fund for some of this. Am I correct in that? Yeah?
Yeah.
You remember that correctly? Okay.
Basically, we have 7 HVAC units, and this is, we're trying to get 3 of them replaced in the next year. So we're working with RDG just to make sure we're not doing something that they're gonna have to take out later if we have a bond referendum. So we're trying to make sure we're impeding the places that won't be touched later.
Hotel motel tax collection is also the area where the chamber was here last session and for their tourism promotion, they had asked for $30,000 in fiscal 21 to do some voting. Mike, I know you wanted to make some comments about the next one.
Yeah, I mean, community development, public relations, we typically haven't really used that money for 2021. What we're looking to do is kind of twofold. First is some of the promotions around the rec center referendum that would come out of there. The other thing we're looking to do is make some improvements to our website and really do some outreach in the sense of, people that maybe are interested in coming to Carroll, why come to Carroll? Why choose Carroll? Really kind of target those individuals that maybe are looking at jobs in the area, have a better city front that they can see and try to get interest in Carroll.
I don't know if anybody else saw this, but in our weekly newsletter from the League of Cities, there was a little link and it had, I can't remember which town, it's not Lamar's, but anyway, number 7 ranked, number 7, one of the best towns in Iowa. So I went that link, and it's a survey that this group has been doing over the past several years. And Carroll, they have 3 categories: a population 1,000 and under, I think 500 and under, and then 5,000 and over, which is the largest amount. Carroll was ranked number 9th in the state, the best city to live in. And they mentioned the schools. You can read in detail the criteria. Schools, safety, and that we have our
Recreation.
housing. They said our housing was, and our incomes were above the state average. So I think that's pretty great to be ranked that high, but it's in that newsletter from the League of Cities. And then you can, they also, besides, the best places to live in Iowa, of course, they have the worst, that was kind of, but then they also go into more detail about safety. And Carroll is right up there, so I thought that was something really to be proud of.
Yeah, and I think you just have to keep highlighting those.
Well, yeah, bring forth what people are saying about us, yeah.
Anything else about that, Mike? And then the last bit from Hotel Motel, is we have been allocating funds for trails. So in fiscal 21, we have another 100,000, and we hope to be able to continue that into the years. As you can see, we have a placeholder to put $100,000 each year into trails. Does anybody have any questions about the hotel motel tax collections?
Well, the other improvements being exceeds what we're going to, I mean, that makes it, our demands exceed the supply, so how does that work?
We had a cash balance that had,
Oh, it's
Built up.
down in the bottom, never mind.
Yeah,
This is right on.
plan to carry over, yep.
so hotel motel as well as local option sales tax, we kind of have this thought behind, or at least staff tries to have this thought behind and put forth recommendations where we're using the funds for more capital items and not for our day-to-day operations. Same thing, local option sales tax, we're running somewhere 1.5 to 1.6, 1.7 million in collections. We get an estimate from the state every year on what we think local option sales tax will be, and then in November, we get a true-up payment. So far, we've been lucky every year that I've been here that it's been a true-up payment, and they didn't have to readjust the future year, or future months, because we do get this monthly. And it's been going up. Every year, it seems like we get a slight increase, so I would say that's saying something for what the local economy is doing.
Retail is doing,
Yeah.
yes.
Yep. So some of the things in local option sales tax, we have been putting $500,000, 500,000 towards street rehab projects and want to continue that into the future. We have set some monies aside for trails at 150,000 and would like to continue that going into the future. We also had set some money aside for the street maintenance building. That was in fiscal 20 and fiscal 19. And this also has it programmed for some monies to go towards the rec center building project. You'll see the balance, what the balance does to the local option sales tax fund based upon these estimates going forward. So there's funding there, there's monies available. You'll notice right now in fiscal 24, it is only half a year of collections projected because of the sunset that
Sunset
is
is in the
currently
middle of
on
the
there, yes.
Is this actual sales in the city of Carroll
No,
It's the county, I think.
County?
they look at it a county-wide basis, and then there's some formula that was put together back in like the 80s that said, at this point in time, they did something, and so basically, each community has a percent that they get. I wanna say we get 50%?
Some.
So it's an equalization law through the state.
Yeah,
Yes.
there you go. That's a good
So
way to
even
put it.
though we're 70% of the sales tax collections countywide, we get about 50% total sales tax in the county.
Which is different than hotel motel, that's a good distinction, because hotel motel is the
Just
actual
for Carroll.
in Carroll
So is
only.
it based on population in your city?
It's a formula.
I can't remember how they came up with that formula.
Population's part of it, but it's like value's part of it.
I think value was something, it was all, whenever they put it into place, it was all that information at that time. Like if that was the late 70s or the mid 80s, I can't remember the time it was, and they've never changed it.
Right. I remember that in the school it was an equalization because, Polk County, with Jordan Creek, and they're creating all kinds of revenue, where the southern tiers of Iowa aren't, so that money gets distributed.
In schools different, because in schools, statewide, it all gets pooled and distributed.
Right, by
equally.
student. Yeah,
Yes.
I was just curious how it was done here.
And for city local option sales tax, it's looked at just at the county level.
And but you get like some of the smaller communities where maybe a lot of those residents come in here to commerce. They're bringing that money in, but it still gets distributed back to those smaller communities that don't get so much of the commerce, so.
And take it a step further, where you have area communities that don't have some of the retail amenities we have in Carroll.
Right.
They do come in and we do get a nice pull factor from
Correct.
that and benefits from it.
And the county gets a portion of it too.
Yes.
For their commerce.
And that's really based on the unincorporated areas of the county, is what they
That's
get
it's
their
for that.
distribution
Okay,
on.
okay.
Are there other questions about the local option sales tax? What's being proposed to be spent out of the fund? One last question, or one last comment on these two funds itself, if you'll recall. When you see these balances at the bottom, we have set aside some funding, so to speak, that we don't want to show that we're spending, in essence, a one-time set aside. The local option sales tax, years ago, we just picked a number of 50,000, and hotel motel, we picked a number of 40,000. So if for some reason collections don't come in as we're projecting right now, however, we're in the midst of a project, hopefully
have some
there's enough there to continue
cover.
on. But of course, we monitor this obviously every year and throughout the year to make sure things look like funding's coming in as we anticipate. Any other questions with those two? I would say one of the last big areas of the budget that we have not discussed yet is the capital projects part related to the culture and recreation projects.
So,
Yes, look at page 70.
I've read this several times.
And it's more specific under tab U if you wanna see the detail, starting on page 198. Which I'm gonna flip to that because the way this was prepared, which in reality the way it was prepared was very optimistically that the projects were all gonna get done by the end of June. Like everything else does, gets done by the end of your fiscal year, right? But namely, some of the projects, and I'll ask Jack to help out if we need some explanation, what we still have in here for funding and such is the Grand Park Phase 1, actually I don't have any monies allocated for this fiscal year, however, there might be some stuff going on, am I correct with that?
Out of this current budget?
Yeah,
Yeah, possibly.
but we do have some monies allocated for fiscal 21.
Yep.
And we've also received a grant
Yes.
for Phase 1 of the project.
The Grand Park revitalization, you see at 160,000. I'm looking at page 71. We did receive a REAP grant at $125,000. I've submitted the paperwork. We should be getting a check for 90% of it here relatively soon. We've made initial contacts. The creek area is county jurisdiction, and Shad Hattery has talked with the county engineer, and we'll have some further discussions and possibly city going to a county meeting, just to explain the situation. We're not asking for money from them. The entire that portion, Shad Hattery and the Grant Park plan estimated at about 130,000 to do that. And what it is the creek, bringing it back, taking out a lot of that tall grass area, rip-rapping it, making it look, a lot more viable and making it look a lot nicer. So this should be 90% funded by the REAP grant.
Is there any copper coming through that thing right
Oh,
now? No, okay.
Randy, is there anything else I didn't say in that area that the city should be talking about?
Don't think so.
And Shive has been emailing back and forth with the new county engineer, so I should probably keep Randy up in the loop so he knows.
Other projects that are flowing through this fund include the pickleball courts, which I understand is under design.
It's under design. We hope to be out to bid March, and this will be an option of 4 courts. Base bid will be 4 courts with an option of 2.
Another project which we discussed tonight actually is the Lighting U Sports Complex. The funding or what's shown for an expenditure on page 199 of this is for fiscal 20 is the monies that we had available at the time. Now that we have approved the larger project, we'll have to do a budget amendment, or we'll monitor this and see how we're going by the end of closer to the end of the fiscal year and end of the project as well. Let's see, other projects in here is, where we've got funding identified is trails, or we've not quite done with phase 1 of the trails project,
Right.
correct?
Railroad.
Yeah.
And that we're anticipating about it's gonna be about $20,000 more.
And then we have the Carroll Trails 2019, which is actually phase 2, which that's nearing completion.
Yeah, completion, yeah.
This next one, it says phase 2, that's because it got cut off, so I'll have to change the wording just a little bit, but that's phase 3, the next phase of the project, or of a trails project.
So Carroll Trails 19, then it should be Carroll Trails Phase 3.
Yes, phase 3.
Okay.
I didn't realize that got cut off, so I'll change the
It says
wording a little bit,
2,
so
so
it's
all right,
supposed
I
to,
just
it's
put a
3. I know on
Gotcha.
my computer system it's 3, but
Yeah.
I only had so many
The
spaces.
printer only.
So this initial startup is probably just for engineering.
Yep.
And then the bottom one, park development, that was, for Kellen's Kingdom.
Okay.
And that project is complete right now. So once we get the engineering and stuff figured out for phase 2, so the balance that we show in this fund right now is basically monies that, when you look at, the ending balance for fiscal 21, that's funds that really can be allocated to a trails project. Those monies have been set aside and have been accumulated from one trails project to the next trails project to the next trails project. That's basic, that's that fund, the different projects that are going on. Like I said, in a perfect world, they would all be done in fiscal 21, or at the end of fiscal 20, but more than likely we'll be carrying the funds, some funds over to fiscal 21.
I just was curious, the park development one, go back up just a second.
Yep.
95,000, is that for the trails in the park? Not
No.
the actual park?
No, that was the portion that the city funded, well, and then we received, some, grants and donations from Kellen's Kingdom, to actually put that playground stuff in.
What do you,
I thought we did 50,000.
We did, we allocated 50,000, I can't remember for sure which the funding source was, if it was hotel motel or local option sales tax. So we transferred the money, but we paid all the bills, we received a grant, Iowa West grant? Maybe?
there's a couple of them.
We received a couple grants, plus Kellen's Kingdom, I'm gonna call it the Kellen's Kingdom Foundation, I don't know if that's the correct name. They gave us donation money, and we paid for the whole project.
Accessible playground equipment was 50, hotel motel.
It was out of hotel motel,
Yeah.
okay.
The entire project was 165,000, and we originally budgeted 50,000 with them getting 115,000. And some of that was through the grants. I think we got 25,000 in grants, 15 and 10, and then they paid the remainder to us.
They paid it to us so that we could pay the vendor.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
paid Bowling
Yep,
Recreation
yep.
160.
Yeah, cause we did the bidding, or took the quotes for the playground equipment, and then we
But
paid
they
them.
would probably had money left over that they probably have in the account for themselves for down
Yes.
the road.
Yes,
Yeah, for
That we don't monitor, that's their business.
that's theirs,
Yeah.
yes. Yep. Other questions about the capital projects for what we call the cultural and recreation area? think that's pretty much the last of all the different sections of the budget. I guess now it's up to council what you want, if you've got other questions or what else you wanna discuss.
So like did the medical insurance internal service fund.
Oh, I'm sorry, we did not touch on that, did we? Well, we did, kind of.
Well,
on
you know, I
the
mean, you
first
mentioned it a while back, but not, I don't know
I-
if there was much more in there that,
That's just the way we account for it. We, in essence, charge each department based upon the employees that are in those departments, their fee for the health insurance cost and transfer it into that fund.
did you get it, did you get anything, what it's gonna cost yet?
No.
How much, I don't think the county had either.
No,
Okay.
no, hopefully
So
we
you're
will
just gonna
get
go
that in
off
the next couple
estimates
months.
from the prior year?
Yeah.
And did you add 5%?
We set the rate at our projections in here have a 15% increase
15%, okay.
in the health insurance premium and a 3 or 5% increase in the COBRA rate.
Now, before we had this legislative change about doing this budget a little sooner, didn't we usually have we never did have a hard figure then, okay.
No, we
I can't
typically don't
remember.
get that until April.
April. Okay, after that.
Mhm.
Sure. Okay. So then,
It was, our core rate's 3.5%. We're both kind of right. You had the 3, I had the 5.
It was somewhere in the middle. But of course, at the end of the day, it's gonna really depend upon what rates we get
what
from
rate you get anyway,
Walmart.
yeah.
And if, if we end up with a catastrophic rate increase, that is a little bit where the health insurance, funding now.
Insurance
Our medical
service.
insurance
Insurance
service fund.
Which is
Would
where
help.
It's under tab C.
You see, it's all back, it's the last thing.
we've been building that for a number of years, haven't we?
Yeah,
Yes.
and we're projected to end fiscal year 20 at about 915,000. So we have a good healthy balance. Now, I think one of the things Debbie Dean is going to talk, at least with Laura and I initially, is do we move to instead of this hybrid, partially self-funded? I think she believes, and it's dependent on what the numbers look like, but she wants to take a hard look at going totally self-funded. We'll look at that and see if that meets our needs and it's something that we can stomach. Going totally self-funded, it's, my experience up in Minnesota, it's a change, it's a real big change. So.
You didn't expect much as far as changing the perpetual funds either.
Oh, no,
They
There's
look
not
like
a lot
they
of
were pretty
activity.
consistent, yeah.
well, and basically right now the only activity is we allocate some interest income to them.
Mhm.
We could transfer that out of there to go towards our operating, but the amount of interest we're getting is not a huge amount, so we
Right.
felt it more beneficial to leave it
Stay
in those
going.
funds
That's
for
what it
now,
looks
yeah.
like, yeah. Okay. So we have to, gonna post this and then we come back,
Well,
what's that?
and certainly, the council has an option at this point. We don't have to set the public hearing tonight, we can do that in 2 weeks. We have included in the packet, Laura can go through it, but we haven't included the information on the public hearing, we have the public hearing notice included in the packet. So it's really the council's discretion, if you wanna take some time, and if you have some changes you wanna contemplate, we ask that you get those to us as soon as possible, because we'll need to see how that affects the budget. But if the council doesn't foresee any, you certainly can proceed with setting the public hearing.
So setting the public hearing for this is just as the same as setting the public hearing for the budget, where you set the upper limit of what you're setting your levy rate at. And so then at the public hearing, you can take comments from the public, you can talk amongst yourself and decide if you would like to leave it at what you had originally said, published, or lower it, but you could not go above it unless you republished. And actually, the timeline that we have set out, we would not have time to redo that
without holding special meetings.
without holding special meetings.
But it'd still be tight.
So
I'm good.
if we set the public hearing, tonight with this information, the actual public hearing won't be until February 24th because of the publication requirements and the timing. We just don't have enough time to get it to the newspaper and get it, and meet the 10-day, minimum 10-day requirement.
So if we have the public hearing on the 24th, we can vote to do it, you'll still have time to get it published or sent to the state in plenty of time.
So this starts the process. This would be the first of 2 public hearings. This was a change last year. So you would hold this first public hearing on the maximum levy for just a select number of levies. On the 24th, you would really have to hold a public hearing, take some type of action, and then you would have to, after you approve a resolution setting the max levy, that same night you need to set the public hearing for the final public hearing that would happen.
For the
in
budget.
March, for the budget as a whole.
That we can do that the first meeting in March then.
We can actually do it the same night.
Or
that
you can do
we-
it the same
yep.
night? Oh,
But we
okay.
just have to approve this
This.
first.
Okay. Yep.
And then set the public hearing for the budget. But you can do it in the same night,
Yes.
that part of it,
But you have to approve the resolution
yes.
before you can approve the resolution set the second public hearing. That is required. But it can happen the same night.
Just
That-
when I think I understood.
Oh,
You know,
why they did that?
Just tell us where we need to be.
And the other irony is, this first form says we're gonna increase our budget by 0.63%.
Our tax collection,
Tax-
It's our tax
yeah.
collection.
so.
Which falls under the 2% of that, that
Yes.
requirement, so.
But then we're gonna turn around and say, really only increase it by 0.4%, just to confuse everyone.
They ever tell you why they're doing that? You ever hear about that?
Transparency.
I-
No,
yeah.
come on.
I don't think they understand what that is.
No.
Oh, my God.
Confusion.
Yeah.
So,
That's why it's important to follow legislation when
Yeah.
it's reported out of committees. So you can lobby our representatives, not that it did us any good.
Well,
well, Mike
it
really
did,
did.
you know, from what
He
it
was
originally.
down there a lot and
Well,
talked with
and
Brian
what it
a
originally
lot.
started at,
Oh, God.
this
This was-
is way
Yeah.
different
I
than what
talked
it's
to
started at.
Brian 3 times before he voted, the same day he voted, their final vote was that night, like around midnight.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
we tried, I know a lot
the,
of,
the, what they had originally was just, it was outrageously incomprehensible what they were gonna try and do to the cities. And Mike had a long discussion with Brian, who got him in touch with the originator of the legislation, and at least got him to compromise down to this
they ended up with the Senate version instead of the House version.
version.
But they're going into our budget again, but there's a link, all
Yeah.
those links with,
Mike sent
open
that link that
records
you can
law.
go to, yeah.
No, this is another one with the open records law, now they're including open meetings rule, they're looking at any topic that has to do with the budget. That you better be careful, the sunshine law may kick in, if you have it, yeah. It's very broad, it's, yeah.
Well, one of the updates, you sent out a link that you can go to so that you can
about,
get legislative updates to your email. Mike sent that out.
Every Friday,
So
yes.
you get the
Right.
legislative updates
Right.
every Friday. You can
They're
just put your
worth
email in and then they,
Yeah.
League of Cities email does the same thing.
Yeah,
Are you getting
The legislative
related link on
Yeah.
Friday?
That's-
Yes, that's what we're
It's the
talking
same
about.
thing.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about.
There's also another piece of legislation right now that any city employee or elected official
yeah, that's what you just
that
sent out.
lobbies more than 10 hours a month, it has to be tracked and published on your website.
lobby, You mean a paid lobbyist?
Nope, doesn't have to be paid. You as a city council member, if you lobby for any topic more than 10 hours a month, it now has to be listed on the city website.
Oh my.
And there's been some discussion on the city manager listserv of, well, that also includes under the broad definition, if you go read about lobbying, traveling to Des Moines.
That's what I was gonna ask, what is included?
No. So,
10 hours isn't gonna go far.
no.
Especially if you live up by
That's
St. Paul.
suppressing freedom of speech.
Well, and it actually came out of the guy that wrote the property tax bill last year, that got turned down. He now turned this piece of legislation really just trying to stymie local government from getting involved. Yeah.
They named that after you.
Mike, I appreciate how much in depth you track these things for us to help us. There's so much going on.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Especially this year. And it's gonna come very
Well-
fast and furious.
Yeah, we're losing our local control in many ways.
This legislation about the budget was the start of it.
Get home rule.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta let us know what you need for help, Mike, on this copper thing too.
Yeah.
Mike and I are ready.
You only get 10 hours.
We're gonna tackle the rest of this.
Yeah. But if all of us think,
Do you wanna just talk about the form? Go through that.
that was tricky.
Yeah, let me find it again, hang on. Okay, so this is a form that was created by the Department of Management as our guide for city officials to make sure we were including all of the requirements that the law said we had to have in there. So obviously at the top it lists the city name.
Where's
Oh, sorry, this was in your
Council package.
council packet.
It's the last page of the council packet tonight.
No, I'm trying to think if I can, you wanna pull it up on here?
Yeah. It
Otherwise,
explains what the problems are.
Oh, yep.
It's easy. Right here.
Okay, so let me see if I can zoom in.
Oh, there
You
you
guys
go.
see that okay?
Yeah.
I need to zoom just a little bit more. Okay, so now everybody can see it okay?
Yep.
Okay, so obviously city name at top, meeting would be February 24th, meeting time 5:15 here in the council chambers. Then the next, the bulk of it, what they're trying to get us to do here is, so the first column is the current year certified property taxes, so that's under fiscal 20. What we actually, the first line, regular taxable valuation, that is our taxable valuation for fiscal 20. And then, based upon that valuation, it breaks down, these are the only required levies that fall under this law that we have to figure out our percent change from year to year. So, if you recall from the budget form, the amount of levies that actually can make up the different types of levies that can make up the full city levy is like a page long. Here they're condensing it down to what, a third of a page of the ones that we're doing this comparison on. So the first one, regular general, that is our 810, the amount of taxes we generate. So that's what we generated or requested to generate in fiscal 20, it's at 4.2 million. If you go to the next column, what they're doing here is, now the line saying regular taxable valuation, budget year effective property tax at 525 million. So if we took our 1/119 values, applied it to the levy rates that we requested in fiscal 20, these would be the tax dollars that we would generate. If we didn't change the levy number, these are the tax dollars. And so the levies that we deal with is the 810, the liability, property, and self-insurance costs, and then those three bottom ones, police and fire, FICA, other employee. We group that all together whenever we talk about our employee benefits. They break them out on here, but we group it all together. So if we used our 1/119 valuation, so what we built our fiscal 21 budget off of, that value, applied the levies that we had, the levy numbers that we had requested from fiscal 20, these were the tax dollars that generated. So you can see the difference in those first two columns. we had a levy rate of $10 and almost 7 cents of what we actually asked. In 21, the effective property was $10.03. But what we had built our budget on, and if we approve this and say, hey, we want to hold our public hearing on this, now we're using our actual property valuations, taxable valuation, and then the actual numbers that we requested. And at the bottom there, it shows that the levy tax rate would be $10, almost $10.10. And then the difference of the comparison is a 0.63% increase in actual tax dollars. Not levy, but dollars collected from fiscal 20 to what you would request in fiscal 21 based upon the levies that we've talked in our budget sessions right now, these last few sessions.
Even though our levy rate's 11.59.755.
Because you do not have to
We
include
don't
the
have
debt
to include
service
those other-
levy.
On the first
And that's where I'm like, so that completely throws out the whole transparency thing.
Yeah.
We were more transparent last year than we are this year.
Yeah, well, you will be after the second.
Yes.
Yeah.
And to say, you cannot, it's not that you don't have to, you cannot
Include
include
that.
debt service levy in this notice.
Don't we have to at some point publish the true levy?
That will be in the next.
That's the next,
That's
that's
the
the next.
Second one,
Yes.
yeah, when you had the debt,
This is really
Oh.
confused, like you said.
keep the mics off.
And then another fun thing is you'll see on here, towards the very bottom, there's that bottom shaded box, if applicable, the above notice will also be available online. We listed all of our social media sites that we currently have, from what the city offices have to what the library has to what the PD has. Cause there's been a little bit mixed information, I guess, out there. We know we have to post it on social media. However, we were not 100% sure if it just meant the main one for the city or if it meant all your city entities. So we're covering ourselves and gonna put it on
That's
all social media that we
That's
have.
pretty smart. Yeah.
And we actually have if it's okay with council, we need to update this. It should be cityofcarroll.com/finance. And then we're also missing the rec center website.
Oh my gosh, yes,
Oh yeah, that's the Carroll Rec Center website, yeah.
yes.
So if we can make those
Change.
amendments.
Rex on Facebook.
You need a motion to do that.
Pinterest thing listed, so that's good.
We have what?
You can use
Pinterest.
this filter, so you can
Oh, I
I
can't.
would ask that you
Instagram,
The last
make
one.
that with that revision.
Oh,
Because this has to, this notice has to be
I
approved.
didn't know we had.
Oh, this no, we have to approve this tonight.
Yes.
That, oh, okay.
A lot of people go to it.
So
I
we'll
completely
need,
forgot about those, oh my gosh.
You want a motion to,
so we'll need, I'll look for a motion to approve this form with the addition of adding the rec center website and
Facebook, you guys have Facebook, right?
finance website.
Yeah, we'll change that.
Okay.
So let us, we can update the notice, online notice section. If that's okay.
So we'll update the online notice section with the addition of the rec center and the finance. So
Yep.
that's what I need the motion on.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that motion.
There's a motion and a second. Any other discussion with regards to the notice of public hearing proposed property tax levy form? If not, we'll go ahead and vote, please. Oh, sorry.
Haley,
Yes.
Fleshner,
Yes.
Dirks,
Yes.
Seaman,
Yes.
Cots,
Yes.
Base.
Yeah.
Motion's approved.
Thank you. So that meeting date, that'll be the 24th at 5:15 for that first one. Okay.
Do you need another motion for that, or
Yeah.
accepting this form, is that doing that?
That's what we did with that form.
Because it's already
Sorry.
dated.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, because the date's on there.
Yeah, the motion will.
I was just making clarification, just so everybody.
Setting the public hearing
Yeah,
date and making the corrections to the form
Yeah.
before publication.
Is that it? Anything else? Greg, you've been quiet all night, didn't you?
I sure
He was nervous when we make cuts. That's why.
Yeah, that's
You didn't
right,
have
that's
a
why I
vote
stepped
tonight.
Need a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Tough crowd.
Motion and a second. We'll go ahead and vote, please.
Fleshner,
Yes.
Dirks,
Yes.
Haley,
Yes.
Seaman,
Yes.
Cots,
Yes.
Base.
Yes.
We are adjourned.